A man is running through the streets of Capernaum, and everyone can see it. Not a beggar, not a fisherman, a ruler of the synagogue, the kind of man who walks slowly, who is greeted first, who has a reserved seat and a title and a reputation to protect. And here he is, robes gathered in his fists, sandals slapping the stone, shoving past the very people who are supposed to bow to him. His name is Jairus, and his little girl is dying. You know this kind of running. Maybe you've done it. The run where dignity stops mattering. The run where you would trade every ounce of standing you have ever earned for 5 more minutes. He is not running toward a doctor. The doctors have already gone home. He is running toward a carpenter's son from Nazareth, a man with no medical training, no synagogue office, no credentials at all. And when he finds him, this ruler of Israel falls face down in the dirt at his feet. My little daughter lieth at the point of death. Come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed. Now, watch what Jesus does over the next 3 years, because Jairus is only the first. Before it is over, Jesus will stand over 3 dead bodies and speak to all of them like they can still hear him. And here is the detail almost everyone misses, the one that turns 4 separate miracles into a single deliberate argument. Pay attention to how long each one has been dead. Jairus' daughter will be dead for minutes. A widow's son will be dead for hours. A man named Lazarus will be dead for 4 days, long enough that his own sister begs Jesus not to open the tomb because of the smell. Each grave older than the last, each one further gone. As if Jesus were climbing a staircase, 1 step at a time, proving something with every step. And there is a 4th grave in this story. A grave I want you to hold in the back of your mind the whole way through, because it is the strangest one of all. It is the grave where the man who raised the dead would one day be laid himself. 3 days in the dark, sealed with a stone, and no one, no father, no mother, no weeping sister, standing outside to call his name. We will get to that grave. But not yet, because this is not a list of miracles. This is not a highlight reel of the impossible. This is not a story about medicine failing and magic winning. This is a story about a God who kept walking up to the one thing every human being is powerless against. The thing that has never once returned what it took, and speaking to it like it was nothing. Like it was sleep, like it was a child he only needed to wake. And it started with a father in the dirt and a little girl who had at that very moment just run out of time. So Jesus goes with him. And this is where the first agony begins, because Jesus does not hurry. On the way to the dying girl, a woman in the crowd, a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years, who has spent every coin she owns on doctors who only made her worse, reaches out and touches the edge of his robe. And Jesus stops. In the middle of a rescue mission with a little girl's life draining away by the second he stops, he turns around, he asks who touched him. He has a whole conversation. Put yourself in Jairus' sandals for 1 moment. Your daughter is dying. The one man who can save her is standing in the road, talking, while the sun keeps moving and the clock keeps running. You want to scream. You want to grab his sleeve and drag him forward. And then over the heads of the crowd, you see them coming. Servants from your house. Their faces already told you everything before they opened their mouths. Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? Dead, you were too late. He was too slow. It is finished, and not the good kind of finished. But Jesus hears it too, and he turns to the shattered father and says 5 words that make no sense to anyone standing there. Be not afraid. Only believe. Believe what? She's gone. They walk to the house, and it is already full of the sound of professional mourners, because in that culture, death came with an industry. Flute players. Wailing women paid to grieve loudly so the family would not have to grieve alone. Josephus and the rabbis tell us the same thing. Burial happened fast, the same day, and the mourning began the moment the breath stopped. So the house is a storm of noise, and Jesus walks in and says something that gets him laughed at. Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. They laughed at him, scornfully, because they had seen the body. They knew dead when they saw it, but Jesus was doing something with that word on purpose. He was renaming the thing everyone feared. Not death, sleep. Something you wake up from. He clears the room, takes the mother, the father, 3 of his men, and walks to the bed where the girl lies still. And he takes her cold little hand, a thing no rabbi would do because touching a corpse made you unclean. And he leans down close, the way a parent does in a dark room, and he says 2 words in his own language, Talitha cum. It means, little lamb, get up. It is the exact phrase a mother would use to wake a sleeping child on an ordinary morning. and her eyes open, and she stands up, and she walks, and the very next thing Jesus says, the God who just conquered death, is give her something to eat. Because she's 12 and she's probably hungry, dead for minutes. That's the first step. Now here's what most people miss. Every time so far someone begged him, Jairus fell in the dirt and asked. But the second grave? Nobody asked at all. Look at what happens in a town called Nain. Jesus is walking up to the town gate, and a funeral is walking out. And funerals in that world were not quiet. A crowd mourners, the body carried on an open wooden bier for everyone to see. And at the front of it walks a woman with nothing left. She is a widow, her husband already gone. And the body on that bier is her son. Her only son. You have to understand what that meant. In that world, a widow with no son had no income, no protection, no voice, no future. Her son was not just her child, he was the last wall standing between her and total ruin. So she is not only burying a boy she rocked to sleep, she is burying herself. Everything she is about to become is written in that procession. Alone, poor, invisible for the rest of her life. And Jesus sees her. Nobody points her out. Nobody asks him to intervene. He just sees one woman in a crowd of hundreds, and the Bible says his heart broke. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said unto her, Weep not. Then he does the unthinkable again. He walks up and touches the bier, stopping the whole funeral in its tracks, making himself unclean in front of the entire town. And he speaks to the corpse, not to the mother, to the dead boy. Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak. Sat up, in the middle of his own funeral. Started talking, and Luke gives us one line that will break you if you slow down and feel it. And he delivered him to his mother. He didn't just raise a boy, he handed a woman back her entire life. Dead for hours this time. On his way to the grave, one step further gone than the last. 2 graves down, and the pattern is already showing its face. The longer death had held on, the louder Jesus proved he owned the keys. But the 3rd grave is coming, and on the 3rd one Jesus does something he has not done yet. He waits on purpose, he lets it get worse. Stay with me. Before we walk to that 3rd grave, do one thing for me. Look back at what you've already seen. A girl dead for minutes, a boy dead for hours. The clock keeps moving and so does Jesus. One step higher up the staircase every time. And we are not done. There is a grave ahead where the body has been in the ground so long that hope itself has left the building. If you've never noticed this pattern before, subscribe, because the 4th grave breaks it. And here's something to do while we go. Keep count of the days, minutes, hours, and soon, 4 days. Hold that number because it's about to matter more than any other number in this story. Now let's go to Bethany, where a man named Lazarus has been dead long enough that even his own family has given up. There was a family in a village called Bethany, just 2 miles from Jerusalem, that Jesus loved. 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, and their brother Lazarus. This was not a stranger in a crowd. This was a home Jesus stayed in, a table he ate at, friends he laughed with. And one day a message reaches him on the road. Lazarus is sick. The words the sisters send are almost unbearable in how simple they are. Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. They don't even ask him to come. They don't have to. Of course he'll come. He loves this man. Everyone knows it. So here is what you expect to happen next. You expect Jesus to drop everything and run, the way Jairus ran, the way you would run. You expect the story to move fast, because a friend is dying and the clock is loud. Instead, John tells us something that has confused readers for 2,000 years. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. He waited, on purpose. He got the message that his friend was dying, and he stayed put for 2 more days. Sit with how that would feel if you were Martha. You sent word, you know he got it, and he doesn't come. The hours pass. Your brother's breathing gets shallower. You keep looking down the road. Nothing. And then your brother dies, and he still isn't there, and you are left to wonder if the one person who could have saved him simply didn't care enough to hurry. But something else is happening that the sisters can't see. Jesus finally turns to his men and says, "Let us go into Judea again." And they are horrified, because the last time he was near Jerusalem, people picked up stones to kill him. Going back means walking straight toward his own death. And it's here that one of the disciples says a line that will echo strangely by the end of this story. Thomas, the one we only remember for doubting, looks at the others and says, "Let us also go, that we may die with him. Let us go die with him." He means it about Lazarus. But hold that sentence. It's about to point at something none of them understood yet. When Jesus arrives at Bethany, Lazarus has already been in the tomb 4 days. Now here's the part nobody tells you, and it's the whole reason John keeps repeating that number. In a later Jewish tradition, recorded in the rabbinic writings, the soul of a dead person was thought to hover near the body for 3 days, hoping to return. On the 3rd day the face changed, decay set in, and the soul departed for good. After that there was no ambiguity, no hope, no maybe he was only in a coma. 4 days meant dead beyond any argument. 4 days meant gone. Josephus and the burial customs of the era tell us the same thing. Bodies went into the ground fast, and by day 4, the grave had done its work. Jesus didn't arrive 4 days late by accident. He arrived 4 days late so that no one, not one skeptic in that crowd, could say it wasn't real. Martha hears he's coming and runs out to meet him on the road, and what pours out of her is grief and accusation tangled together. Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. If you had come, if you hadn't waited. It's the most honest thing a hurting person can say to God, and she says it to his face. And then, still standing there in the wreckage of her own hope, she adds something remarkable. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. She doesn't know what she's asking for. She's just refusing to let go of him. Jesus tells her, thy brother shall rise again. And Martha, like any grieving person who has heard 100 well-meaning words at a funeral, gives the polite, exhausted answer, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day, someday, far off. At the end of everything, she's talking about a doctrine, and Jesus stops her. He looks at this shattered woman on a dusty road and says one of the most staggering sentences ever out loud, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Do you hear what he just did? She said resurrection is a thing that happens someday. He said resurrection is not a thing, it's a person, and he is standing in front of her. Believest thou this? And through her tears she says yes. Then Mary comes and she falls at his feet weeping, and behind her comes the whole crowd of mourners weeping too. And what happens next is the shortest verse in the entire Bible, and the most human thing God has ever done. Jesus wept, he knew. Understand that. He already knew he was about to raise Lazarus. He had said so out loud. The tears weren't confusion, and they weren't despair. So why does the God of the universe stand outside a grave and cry over a death he is 30 seconds from undoing? The Greek gives us a clue that most English Bibles hide. The verse says Jesus groaned in the spirit, but the word underneath is embramoumai, and it doesn't mean sadness. And many scholars believe it carries not just sorrow but anger, the way a warhorse snorts before a battle. Jesus wasn't only grieving at that tomb. He was furious, not at Mary, not at Martha, not at the mourners. He was standing in front of the open wound of everything that had gone wrong with the world. Death itself, the thing that steals children and widows' sons and beloved brothers. And he was angry at it. He wept because he loved, and he seethed because he hated what death does to the people he loves. Hold on to that, because it changes everything about the God you thought you were reading. He is not a distant force watching your losses from far away. He stood at a grave you would recognize. The smell, the stone, the weeping family, the unbearable 4 days too late of it all. And he cried, and he burned. And then he asked them to do the one thing no one wanted to do. Take ye away the stone. And Martha, practical, honest Martha, says what everyone is thinking. Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. There it is, the smell, the proof, the point of no return. Minutes she could have believed, hours maybe. But 4 days and a stench rising from behind that stone? This is the grave where hope goes to die. This is one step past anything you have ever seen him do. And Jesus looks at her and he asks, Said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe thou shouldest see the glory of God? Then he turns toward the tomb, the stone comes away, the crowd steps back from the smell. And in that terrible waiting silence, a friend 4 days dead, a grief 4 days deep, a God 4 days angry, Jesus lifts his voice. But it gets stranger still, because of how he says it. He doesn't whisper, he doesn't reach in, he calls the man by name out loud, like he's waking someone in the next room. We'll hear those words in a moment. First, understand where we are on the staircase now, personal then family. Now this. A public grave, a sealed tomb, a decaying body, in front of a hostile crowd 2 miles from the men who want him dead. Every grave older than the last, and the oldest one is still ahead. Then he turns toward the tomb. But before he says a word to the dead man, he does something you might miss if you read too fast. He lifts his eyes to the sky, and he prays out loud not for himself but for the crowd. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by I said it, that they may believe. He wants them to know exactly who is about to do this, and where the power comes from. He is not performing a trick. He is opening a window into heaven and letting a whole crowd watch, and then he calls, Lazarus, come forth. 3 words, that's all. The God who spoke galaxies into being does not need a speech. He calls a dead man by his name, the way you'd call someone in from the yard. And here's a detail the early church loved to point out. Jesus said the name, Lazarus. If he had simply said, come forth, they used to say, every grave on the hillside would have emptied, every tomb in Bethany, because the voice that calls the dead is not a suggestion. It is a command that death cannot refuse. He had to aim it. He had to say the one name, or all of them would have come. And behind the stone, in the dark, in a body 4 days into decay, something happens that has no natural explanation and never will. The heart that stopped starts. The lungs that collapsed fill. The cells that were breaking down knit back together. And a man who was a corpse a moment ago stands up in his own tomb, wrapped head to foot in grave linens, and shuffles toward the light. He that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. Picture it. The crowd that stepped back from the smell now steps back from something far more terrifying, a bandaged figure emerging from a tomb into the afternoon sun. And Jesus almost casually says, loose him and let him go, unwrap him. He won't be needing the burial cloths. Minutes, hours, 4 days. The staircase is complete except it isn't, because I told you at the very beginning there was a 4th grave. Do you remember? The strangest one. The one where the man who raised the dead would be laid himself. Here is where the whole pattern turns and looks back at you. Everything you have watched, Jairus' daughter, the widow's son, Lazarus, every one of them needed someone. A father who begged, a God who saw, a voice outside the tomb calling the name. Not one of them raised themselves, not one of them walked out of death under their own power. They were all called out. Every single time there had to be someone standing on the outside. Now go to the 4th grave. It's a borrowed tomb outside Jerusalem. The body inside is the same voice that said Talitha Cum, the same voice that stopped a funeral at Nain, the same voice that shouted into the dark at Bethany. And he has been dead not for minutes, not for hours. For 3 days the stone is sealed. A guard is posted. His friends have scattered. Thomas, who said, let us go die with him, is in hiding. There is no father in the dirt. There is no weeping sister. There is no one at all, standing on the outside to call his name. And on the 3rd morning he comes out anyway. No one rolled the stone away so he could leave. The angel moved it so the world could look in and see it already empty. No trumpet from a father, no sister collapsing in relief, just an empty shelf, a pile of folded cloth and a garden going quiet in the dawn. The one grave in all of human history that opened from the inside. Do you understand what that means? Nobody called him. Nobody had to. Long before he had said the strangest sentence of his whole ministry, and now it makes sense. No man taketh my life from me. I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down and I have power to take it again. The Greek verb he kept using over those other graves, the one that means to raise up, to stand a fallen thing back on its feet. He now turns on himself. The one who called the dead out of their tombs walks out of his own. He did not escape death. He did not cheat death. He did not survive death. He walked straight into it, all the way down to the bottom, and then he walked back out, carrying the keys. And that is the difference between Lazarus and Jesus. Lazarus came out of his tomb still wrapped in grave clothes, because Lazarus would need them again someday. He was raised back into a life that would still end. But when they went to the 4th grave, the cloths were folded and left behind, because that one was never going to need them again. And neither, he promised, will you. Let me bring this all the way down to where you actually live. Maybe you have sat in a hospital room at 3 in the morning, watching a monitor. You know the sound it makes. And you know the sound it makes when it stops. That flat, endless tone that turns a person into a memory in a single second. Maybe you were holding a hand that went from warm to still. Maybe you are dreading the day you will. That room is the loneliest place on earth, because in that room there is nothing you can do. You cannot beg the machine. You cannot bargain with the silence. You are Jairus with no one left to run to. The whole reason the early Christians started doing something that baffled the Roman world. Burying their dead not with despair but with hope, calling their cemeteries sleeping places, speaking of the dead as those who had only fallen asleep. The whole reason was this: They had watched a man conquer death in stages, minutes to hours to 4 days, and then conquer it in himself. So when they laid their own children in the ground, they did it believing there was still a voice that knew every name, and a morning coming when it would call them out. That flat tone in the hospital room is not the last sound. Not if the story you just watched is true, because the same voice that leaned over a 12-year-old and whispered, "Little lamb, get up," is the voice that will one day stand outside your grave, and mine, and say the one thing death has never once been able to refuse: your name. So what do you do with all of this? Let me leave you with 3 things. First, the order was never random. Jesus didn't raise 3 people at 3 different stages of death by accident. Minutes, hours, 4 days. It reads like he climbed that staircase on purpose, proving at every level that there is no depth of death too deep for his voice to reach. The longer the grave had held on, the louder he proved he owned the keys, and then he proved it on himself. Second, every grave he opened was a rehearsal. Jairus' daughter, the widow's son, Lazarus, they all died again eventually. Their raisings were previews, not the main feature. The main feature was an empty tomb outside Jerusalem that opened from the inside, and it was pointing at yours. What he did for them in a moment, he promised to do for you for good. And third, this is the one I want you to carry out of here. When Jesus stood at Lazarus' tomb and wept, he already knew he was about to raise him. He wasn't crying because he was out of options. He was crying because he loves, and because he hates what death does to the people he loves. So if you are standing at a grave tonight, a real one, or the kind you carry inside, hear this. The God of the universe is not far off and unmoved. He has stood exactly where you are standing. He wept, he burned, and he has never once lost a fight with a grave. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 4 graves, the girl, the widow's son, Lazarus, and the empty tomb, which one hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And the next time you're afraid that death gets the last word, remember the first word he ever spoke to a dead child. He leaned down close in a quiet room and he said, "Little lamb, get up." He's still saying it.